Future Design Podcast.
You could talk about this trust system as well, right?
Yeah.
I briefly touched on it, but it starts with the trust, and then you have relationships, up close,
Right,
shake up talent.
Joe wanted to write the book was he felt like there wasn't really a guide on actually doing business in Singapore, in Asia, right? Theoretically, you know what you're supposed to do, right? But there were no actual case studies to go by. People have come here, they've done it, they've made it. So that's why he wanted to do this. And I was working with him previously. I come from a more political background, right? I was writing articles for the local university, things like that. That's when I was working with him. And so he had done a lot of interviews for, websites like Forbes. And he's like, look, I have all this information that I want to sort of synthesize and put together into a book to help people who want to do business in Asia. And since you sort of have the political and socioeconomic context, can you help me sort of put it together and contextualize it? So that's how it came about. And we were wondering how to structure it, because you can't just throw a bunch of case studies into a book, right? And we decided to come out with this trust system. And like I said, it's called the trust system, and the first element of it is T for trust. And that's what is the base of everything else that comes forward later, right? So when you're talking about trust, you're thinking about not just how to develop trust with your consumer, but also relationships in the country that you're in. So when Joe first came to Asia, he started off in China, and he was like, I have all these qualifications, but I don't have the connections, and how do I make these connections? And even in Singapore as well, how do you get a job if you're coming here from overseas? How do you make these connections? And we talk a bit about that, just things like, especially for business, how do you build the right relationships with the media, with peers, even if you want to do collaborations and things like that. And then we also go on to how important it is to localize in terms of getting up close with the population, understanding their needs, understanding where there is a gap in the market that you can come in. And then I guess it's really about not just coming in aggressively and looking to get a share of the pie, right? We wanted to really reinforce the fact that you have to understand your host country if you want to be successful, if you want to be trusted. A lot of people make the mistake of just coming in, following a certain model and thinking that it's going to work without getting to know its host country. Like we were talking about Uber and Grab, what's the difference, right? So I think that's where the book came from. That's what we had in mind when we put the system together.
And can you talk about the other R-U-S-T?
Oh yeah. So we talked about trust, relationships, up close, getting to understand your consumer base, and then it's shake up. So shake up, what we mean is basically do things differently, right? Or find a niche that hasn't been addressed before. So it can be, you really have to sort of survey your market, see where you can come in. And again, this is a process that involves talking to people, understanding what they need, what they want, and addressing it. It's not just about what you want to achieve when you come into a place. This even goes for like personal relationships. So Joe talks about this a bit. And he's like, if you want to attend trade shows, for example, you want to be a speaker at these trade shows, you want to be, a lot of people go with the approach that, listen to me, I have a lot to say, I have good things to say. But in reality, you should be talking to these organizers and saying, look, this is how I can help you with this.
Yeah.
Right? So the same approach to the market as a whole. How can I help you? How can I address your needs?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of going about it. One of the case studies that we talk about is a fashion brand called Lily Selb, right? And basically started by these two girls. They were interested in modest wear for Muslim girls, right? You're talking about a huge portion of the population, not just in Singapore, but extending to the rest of Southeast Asia as well. And there's so much to explore that hasn't really been explored because it's so niche.
Yeah.
Right.
What is modest wear?
Modest wear is basically clothing that is appropriate for Muslims, right? So, things like the hijab, people are taking greater interest in the fashion aspect of it, right? And you see that with big brands as well. Like Nike has a pro hijab wear sort of line now, and people are
sports.
coming. Yeah, yeah. So people are coming in, to bank on that as well. But on a smaller scale, they identified something that wasn't really being addressed. There are not enough online stores, for example. You have like thousands of them, right? But no one was actually addressing or providing that sort of thing. So that's one of the examples.
It was like a modern version of a modest wear, right?
Kind
That they were
of.
trying to
Yeah,
create,
yeah,
not like
yeah.
the traditional stuff.
No, not the traditional stuff.
Yeah.
Also, featuring local up and coming designers. Also engaging people who are not just influencers, but friends of theirs who had a decent following in the community. So people can relate to it and be like, hey, I know this person. That's something that I would like to wear, right? So just making it relatable, I guess, because I'm sure it's been addressed before, yeah, sure, but not with the platforms that we have right now, right? So that's one example. And also, we talk about other things as well, and just really how to get inside the minds of people, how to make an emotional impact as opposed to just being practical about everything, right? Yeah. And then the last aspect of the trust system is talent, of course. So, I mean, I think that speaks for itself. If you want to have a successful business, you have to groom a great team. How do you go about doing that, especially in Asia, right? How do you source the right talent? How do you go about HR issues that would be different here compared to the West? So that's some of the
How
things
are
that we
they
talk-
different?
Just things like there is a lot. The gig economy doesn't work the same here,
Okay.
right? A lot of people they engage, for example, Vietnamese graphic designers because there's a huge market for that. But then again, they underpay them compared to people that they would here
Right.
in Singapore, for example. So just being conscious of these things. Also, there's a huge shift towards taking into account the needs of your employees as well. In traditional Asian working culture, there's a very hierarchical sort of way about doing it, even in Japan, right? It's always about just listening to what your boss says. He does it, you do it, and you're good. But now there's a lot more, focus on like things like, I guess it comes to startup culture as well, right? Things like onboarding. Are you a right fit for this company? What can we do for you as well so that you're happy and you want to stay on?
Yeah.
So that's a huge shift towards that employee welfare and how that changes their productivity as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Future Design Podcast.